Julie Ryan, noted psychic and medical intuitive, is ready to answer your personal questions, even those you never knew you could ask. For more than 20 years, as she's developed and refined her intuitive skills, Julie used her knowledge as a successful inventor and businesswoman to help others. Now, she wants to help you grow, heal, and get the answers you've been longing to hear. Do you have a question for someone who's transitioned? Do you have a medical issue? What about your pet's health or behavior? Perhaps you have a loved one who's close to death and you'd like to know what's happening. Are you on the path to fulfill your life's purpose? No matter where you are in the world, take a journey to the other side and ask Julie Ryan.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan show. I'm Julie, your host, and I'm so delighted you could join us this week. It's Happy 4th of July week. This is our 4th of July episode. And I have a special one planned for you. My intention in doing this show is to provide information, insight, and comfort to people all around the world by helping to answer life's unanswerable questions. And my surprise came in a big package this time, and the package's name is Brandon Beachum. Some of you may have heard Brandon a couple of weeks ago. I was on his show, and we had so much fun that I said, "Hey, I gotta come up with something for my 4th of July show since it's on a Thursday and we record on Thursday nights. I'm not going to be able to do it live." And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun to have Brandon on the show? And you guys are going to love Brandon. He is interesting. He's brilliant. He's a forward thinker, and he's just downright fun. So you are in for such a treat. Let me get some introduction done here, and then we'll get right to talking with Brandon. Brandon Beachum is a podcaster, entrepreneur, writer, musician, philosopher, and truth seeker. That's a mouthful, my man. He originally made his way to California from the East Coast when his former band received a development deal with Elektra Records back in 2001. That's a big deal, Brandon. I'm eager to hear about that. Brandon's been a serial entrepreneur since childhood, and in 2010, while living on a friend's couch, founded his first significantly successful company, and it was called Resort Share. In August of 2015, Resort Share, was named one of the fastest growing companies in America on the annual Inc. magazine Fastest Growing Companies list. That's a big deal, you guys. And then recently, Brandon's been focusing on various projects such as HelloVacay.com, the Positive Head podcast, which has been consistently rated in the top 5 spirituality podcasts on iTunes, and on a new late night style consciousness elevating talk show called Optimystic, and that show is set to launch in the summer of 2019. So Brandon, welcome. I'm so thrilled that you're on with me this week, and so excited to introduce you to my gang, to my listeners.
Oh.
So welcome.
Well, I am excited to be introduced, and I just want to start by saying the package is actually 5 pounds lighter than it was maybe 2 weeks ago because I have lost a few pounds.
On purpose?
On purpose, in an effort to prepare for being, on video. As you know, it's really great to hide behind the microphone on podcasts, but with Optimistic, as you just mentioned, I will be stepping out from behind the microphone and being on video. And I'm like, okay, this is coming up in another month or so. Maybe I should just get, I could stand to lose 10 pounds maybe and get in my best shape possible. And so, yeah, I'm mid package alteration as we speak.
And it's so refreshing to hear that from a guy, because that's such a girl thing. Oh, I'm going to be on TV and I need to be, to be 10 or 15 or 50 pounds skinnier because, the camera adds 10 pounds to you no matter what.
Oh, yeah, I forgot that. I forgot about that.
They say. I don't know if that's true, but that's what they say. I don't know about that. Well, welcome. I'm delighted.
Thanks for reminding me, Julie.
You could join us this week. All right. So, Brandon, you're a self-proclaimed serial entrepreneur and truth seeker.
Mm-hmm.
Do you
I
think
would
you were
say that.
born this way, or did you develop these skills as you just have been living your life? Do you think we come in with some DNA thing as entrepreneurs? I'm an entrepreneur too. Do you think we come in like this, or do we develop it? Is it nature versus nurture? What do you think about that?
Great question. So what I think is, I'll kind of compare it to playing a sport. Like any of us can shoot a basket, and probably if we take enough shots, we'll make a basket eventually, right? Not all of us were born to be Kobe Bryant, perhaps, or a great basketball star. So I think that's the case with all, whether it's music, whether it's entrepreneurial, ventures, some people were born with certain things that are really just, intrinsically encoded in their DNA. And then you have, the things that we sort of work for and earn. And you and I even discussed this a little bit with a lot of your gifts. When you were on the Positive Head podcast as a guest a few weeks back. And so I think there's in throughout our lives, I would say there's things that we all sort of figure this out. Okay, this is something that I want and I'm going to go for and I'm going to work for. And then there's those things that are really just sort of encoded in a part of our makeup from the get-go. And certainly for me, entrepreneurial, pursuits started when I was maybe, I don't know, 11, 10, something like that, and started selling candy at school. Well, there was one kid who started selling candy before me, and he didn't do it very effectively, but it gave me the idea, and then I was like, okay, I can take this idea and make it better. I started selling, then it became like a thing. And others started copying. Next thing you know, there's a new rule in school that you can't sell candy. So, it just kind of continued from there. I've been a serial entrepreneur ever since. And I've worked for others a few times throughout my, professional life, if you will. And, but I've always come back to, okay, how do I sort of, I learned something here working for this other person. Resort Share is a great example. I was 3 weeks working at the biggest timeshare developer. Wyndham is the name of them. And I basically saw what was being done. I was learning that, but I was at a time where I needed to find something else. My most recent entrepreneurial venture had failed or, been put on ice at that time. And I was like, okay, I need to make money. I need to look at working for someone else. And I went and I worked for this big developer and just, learning something about that business I knew nothing about. And I instantly started spotting the holes in it and sort of what these people were doing, making a lot of money, $500,000 a year, some of these salespeople deceiving people. And I said, well, what if someone could actually deliver on these deceptions? And, and then I set out to see if it could be done. And, after 3 weeks there, they told me I wasn't good enough. I needed to go back into training. And I said, no, it's okay. I think I've learned what I need to here. And I set out to create Resort Share. And, the rest was kind of history from there. So yes, that's my long-winded answer to, I think for me, it was something that I came in with.
Well, I think we entrepreneurs have the I can't help it. I think it's hard to put us. I know for me, I worked for a company right out of college. Certainly I had jobs when I was in college because I put myself through school. At some points when I was in college, I worked 3 jobs to put myself through school in the summers. I worked a 8 to 5 job, and then I had 2 part-time jobs and a weekend job that I juggled those other 2 part-time jobs to pay for my education. Easier said than done. Back when I was in school, now the tuition's just so expensive that I think it's really hard to make that happen. But I think it's hard for those of us. I started my first company at 25, and I think it's hard for us to be in the box that companies put us in because our brains don't work that way. We see, how can this be done better? And what I find, I love reading biographies on entrepreneurs, and I love talking with entrepreneurs, because what I find is that a lot of the really successful ones are people who have seen an idea and then they've refined it and they've made it better. So it's almost like they've let somebody else start blazing the trail, and then they've come in while that people are already on that trail and they've made it better. Certainly that's what I've done with my medical device inventions. We weren't the first ones there, but we saw what was wrong with the ones that were on the market. We were able to break their patents, design a better product, and then do a better job of marketing it and distributing it and licensing it to bigger global companies and things like that. So I don't know.
Wow.
I think school's out with the nature versus nurture. I think we probably come in with some of it, and then as we live our lives, we're nurtured by others and also by our own experiences.
Sure.
As we go through life. But I'm really interested in your musical talents in your career. I didn't know that about you. And
that goes back a ways. Goes back a ways.
I want to hear about that, and I want to hear if you think if it had an effect, if that phase of your life had an effect on leading you to where you are now, and what effect that was, and how did that transpire?
Yeah, it most definitely did. So as I sort of, started coming into my early, as I think of it as, and you would probably speak to this, when you get up to around 21-ish, something like that, I feel like, okay, you're, the pause button is off. You now are picking back up where you left off in your last lives, right? In your last lifetime, your last past life, perhaps, where, now it's like, what is your real mission here to do? A lot of that stuff can start coming online. The first 20 or so years, you're just a kid, like, getting to adulthood. And so for me, when that, around that age, I started really tapping into this idea, that I am one with the source that creates and animates all things, whatever you're going to call it, God, higher self, the universe, whatever you're going to call it. So I got very excited about that topic, which of course is what I talk about on the Positive Head podcast 5 days a week, and forthcoming show Optimystic. That is my big passion. Is my biggest passion in life is to help raise consciousness and elevate consciousness, shift perspectives, so that it empowers people to. I always say with some of these ideas that, look, this sort of premise that we are fractals of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. All is literally one. Separation is an illusion. You start playing with some of those concepts, and I believe the results speak for themselves. And so that's sort of what I help people to do on Positive Head, starting with myself. I always say we teach best what we most need to learn, right? And so I started tapping in around 21, opening up to, I met someone actually with psychic ability, and it was like kind of threw me because I was raised, very conservative Christian perspective, and all of a sudden I'm being exposed to this gift, and I'm like, hold on, what's going on here? Then I started reading metaphysical books and things, and all of a sudden I was just like on fire for this information, and I'm like, I can see how the dots are connected in a way that is super empowering to me. And I'm like looking around me, and this is going back a little over 20 years ago now, and I'm like, people are like, okay, Brandon, what is this you're talking about incessantly now? You think you're God? No, I think you are too. We all are. And it was like either people thought you're crazy, or, that's really interesting, and they go back to their normal, perspective, whatever that may be. And so for me, it just became such a fire and passion to learn more, to talk about it, to, share the perspectives with others. So my first sort of stab at finding a platform to do that was music. I was like, okay, as I started to have my own sort of awakening experience, remembering experience, I thought to myself, okay, if I'm one with the source that creates and animates all things, and I can create anything, what would I want to do most? Oh, I am super passionate about music. Let's form a band. So me and my brother and close friends, got together, and we started making music, and it was such a great time. At that moment, I lived in Nashville, Tennessee. I think we have that town in common.
Right.
I was going to college there at the time, and so we started a band called Kundalini at the time. And people are like, what is that word? This is this really cool Sanskrit word I'd read about in my new understandings or explorations of the ultimate nature of reality. And for those who don't, I'm sure many of you have heard Kundalini. There's a yoga, and it's supposedly a dormant energy source at the base of your spine that if you raise it through meditation or what have you, whatever can trigger your Kundalini awakening.
It's sex, isn't it? I always think of Sting with sex. Doesn't he do like Kundalini sex or something?
Well, there is a sexual element because it's like the energy of creation. So if the caduceus, which is the medical symbol, is based off of Kundalini, which is, think of the medical symbol. It's like a staff with two snakes going up and then wings at the top. Right. So supposedly that's like the spine is the staff. The Kundalini is always represented by snakes. Snake energy, right? Serpent energy. And then the wings at the top. So if you raise your Kundalini from the base of your spine to the top of your head, it's like creative enlightenment. And I have actually many friends who've had, and you could read about these Kundalini, like spontaneous Kundalini, activations, and they can be super intense. I have a good friend who's in the last year it's happened to her, and she's like, it's not all peaches and roses and like energy running up and down your spine like intensely, and opens up your third eye, and sometimes in a way that's almost like uncontrollable for some people, and so it's not it can be super intense. So anyway, I just thought it was a really cool meaning and word at the time. I had no Kundalini awakening experience per se, but anyway, so I started Kundalini, and that was really my first stint at, okay, what's a platform that I can start getting this message out tied to something super creative? I am the creator, and created rolled into one. I want to create. And so we started making music. And, at the time, it was, there wasn't a lot of people sort of lyrically talking about the things that we were talking about. And it's funny for me now because I'm really involved and tied into what's called the transformational festival community is how I refer to it. Kind of like the Burning Man community. A lot of people go to these music and art events that there's a lot of spiritual energy, a lot of people who, doing yoga, doing workshops and psychic ability, metaphysical exploration, a lot of live music performances that are very inspired and sort of have a spiritual centric, chord of some sort flowing through them. And, that's gotten really trendy and popular now out here on the West Coast in California where I'm at. There's a lot of these events, and, and I go to these events now and I'm thinking, wow, I see all the stages and the backdrops and, stuff that we were doing 15 years ago in my band is now, we were putting up like Alex Gray visionary artwork behind us and, talking a lot about spiritual sort of concepts in the lyrics of the songs. And people were like, didn't really get it. And now I'm at these festivals where there's 20-year-olds who like spirituality is like the coolest thing. And the stage sets look like what we were doing 15 to 20 years ago, except way more elaborate and cool, So I feel like we were a little ahead of our time with that one, but it was exactly what it was meant to be. And so I that was definitely my first iteration. We ended up, our bass player's brother at the time was at one point was in No Doubt, which was a pretty popular band. You may have heard of. Gwen Stefani is, pretty well known. Listening, I'm sure, No Doubt. And so, we got to play with some big bands, and probably my highlight was him coming up after a show saying how much my performance like kind of blew him away. And they'd had the biggest song on the FM dial worldwide like a year or so before. So that was my highlight moment, probably. But that we disbanded in 2004. And, started my, the Positive Head podcast in 2015, which was really my next sort of stepping out to find a new platform to share this message that I'm so passionate about sharing. And so it definitely was the precursor, the music stuff to everything that I'm doing now.
Well, and it sounds like it could have been the catalyst to get you to the West Coast too.
Absolutely.
And where you needed to be, which was in LA. And, a lot of people say that California is the land of fruits and nuts, but that's where a lot of the spirituality stuff is based in the US, at least. There's I think, an inordinate amount of it. And I think it's interesting on the whole West Coast and the East Coast too, but really even more so on the West Coast, where where all of that entrepreneurial spirit is. And that's where I lived when I started my first company, and actually most of my companies, I think all of my companies except for one, 8 out of 9 companies were all founded in Los Angeles. And I think that it's because of the energy in those areas of the world that the indigenous people will find areas where there's an energy vortex, if you will. And you look at the companies that are on the West Coast, from Washington all the way down to San Diego, all of Silicon Valley, Microsoft, Nike, a lot of medical stuff, a lot of defense industry stuff. I mean, the whole entertainment industry. Those are all entrepreneurial ventures that turned into big industries. And it's interesting to me that they're all on the West Coast. And there's a vibe there that I feel, maybe because I'm an entrepreneur, but I feel that entrepreneurial mindset there in the business community. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, I absolutely would. And one thing that you brought up that I just would like to speak to, I 100% agree with that. And one of the things that I just thought of was, so around this time, this is going back, 20-ish years ago, a little more than 20 years ago, I was having my own sort of awakening. And I remember I was I lived in Nashville at the time, but I had a girlfriend who lived in Atlanta at the time. And I remember being down there and for a visit, and we were just walking through like an open mall thing, and there's a psychic setup, a booth, and I'd never done anything like that. So I'm like, oh, let's stop here. And so it was my first little reading that I ever had. And the woman said, she said, I see you in a cold place like Chicago working in business. Now, at the time, I was a senior in college. I was planning to move to Chicago after college and work for my uncle in business. And so my jaw hit the floor, like this woman, just called it out complete. We're in Atlanta, Georgia, right? And then she's like, but there's this whole other path in music in California. And, at the time, and then she asked me about music, and I'm like, well, I love music, but I've never made it, or, I'm a big, big music listener and fan. And she's like, yeah, so there's this whole other path for you there. And so, fast forward a year later, I start really, my awakening really starts kicking into high gear. I'm, meet someone from California. I'm, experimenting with some magic mushrooms. I remember one night, and really tapping in, and, that tool for me at the time, it was a great catalyst and tool, and, just sort of saying, oh my gosh, I can do anything. What would it be? I want to make music. Let's do it, And I formed a band that night with a few people that were having this experience with me. And so, it was, I looked back on that later, and then I met someone from California who had just moved to Nashville, and they're like, oh, your music needs to be out there. And he knew some big bands that were kind of happening at the time. And so we ended up coming to visit, and, one thing led to another. So I look back at that now, and it's sort of like the way I view how reality works. I believe there's multiple timelines, and I'm sure you have your own way of sort of breaking this down. But for me, I like to say, our life plays out at the corner of free will and destiny. And it's destined because it's all already happened. Time is an illusion. It's all happening in the eternal now. My 5th birthday party is happening on another channel. I'm just not tuned into that right now, right? Just like if you're watching channel 10, channel 13 is still happening. You're just not perceiving it. And so, I believe your life plays out at the corner of free will and destiny. It's all destined because it's all already happened in the eternal now that is. And you have free will because there's infinite timeline, many timelines, potentialities. There's the version of Brandon that opted to go to Chicago and work in business. So when this person was perceiving it, I always kind of scoff when people say, oh, I don't believe in psychic phenomenon. Otherwise, tell me what number I'm thinking. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. It's like, it's not this exact science. There's all these you could speak to this better than me. There's all these variables and timeline and potentialities based off of the free will of the soul. So right. I believe someone who has a psychic ability is, and we all do to varying degrees, just like we can all shoot a basket. Some people maybe are born to be Kobe Bryant and others aren't. But it certainly is as you can attest to, is a skill that can be learned and developed further if you set your intention as a creator to call that energy into your field, in your life, in your experience. And so yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting when you start thinking, okay, from this moment forward, hearing my words, there's all these versions of you, right? Well, which one do you choose? Which one do you want? You want to experience the greatest and grandest version, right? The one that's the most rewarding. Well, the good news is no matter how improbable that is, like, creating an Inc. fastest growing private company, achieving what 1 in 10,000 entrepreneurs ever do, is like, it's when you start understanding statistics don't matter because you are in your own private YO universe and you are choosing timelines to step into. No matter the greatest and greatest version of yourself may be statistically highly improbable, but if you can think of it, Source has been there, done that, and gotten the t-shirt. And you can play it out by being it to see it. You call in the vibration of it prior to the experience. And, most people have it backwards. They're doing something like work in order to have something like money, in order to be something like happy. But you actually be something like happy, and you find yourself doing and having the reflection of those things. So that really becomes the game. I think the next great manifestation, or the next great art form on our planet, is the art of manifestation. Learning how to create these most epic timelines of ourselves and stepping into them vibrationally. And so, yeah, that's sort of was really looking back on that really played a key role in helping to develop my own personal perspective as to how we sift, potential versions of ourselves, right?
I agree. And I use the example of we're all on the yellow brick road. And we're all wearing ruby slippers or ruby shoes. And the yellow brick road only goes one direction, and it goes towards the Emerald City, which is Oz, which is just an analogy for heaven and our spirit's path. And we may step on a brick that lands us in a field of blooming poppies, and it's very pleasant, or we may step on a brick that lands us in a castle with a bunch of flying monkeys chasing us, and it's not so pleasant because it's scary, but it's all an experience on our path, and it's all leading us to the Emerald City. And so right. I see you coming to LA with your music career, and certainly it's a big deal to have a development deal with a big record company like that. That's a huge name. Too. What's that?
Back in those days, you didn't have the internet and a way to sort of, get out there without these big distribution channels.
Right.
So it was a lot bigger then than it is now, I would say.
Yeah. And that's a 1 in a million opportunity as well, because think about all of the different talents that a record company sees, and the fact that you were chosen, I think, was all part of the synchronicity of where your path was leading you to get you to the West Coast and all of that, which leads to my next question, and that is, you had said that you come from a fairly conservative family, and I know on the East Coast. So how do your parents and your family members, how were they at that point when you wanted to come to LA and pursue a music career? Were they encouraging? Did they think you were nuts? Though you mentioned that as you were starting to talk about what I consider woo-woo things, spiritual things, did they look at you like, oh my God, is this guy just using serious hallucinogenic drugs or what's going on? And
right.
And how did you deal with that? How did you maneuver around that? How did it influence, or did it influence any of your decisions?
Yeah, I've always been fiercely independent. So, my parents have told me, yeah, Brandon, from the time you came out, you were like, you came out like fiery. My grandfather, she said, I don't remember this, but used to always call me Bull of the Woods. I guess that's an old saying for, someone who's got a lot of some, energy, I suppose, or
vim and vigor, they used to say.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I always was very, I'm a middle child, but I was definitely the most, my sister is I don't know if you follow astrology or subscribe to it very closely or not, but my sister is a Pisces and my brother a Cancer, very sensitive, and I'm a Leo. And so I definitely was always the most fiery and sort of the most dominant child, I guess, in some regards, and have always been fiercely independent. So I think they were a little bit thrown because it was not something they had ever entertained, and they were very deeply entrenched in this sort of traditional, ultra conservative, hell and brimstone sort of perspective on, who we are and what's going on, and God loves you, but if you, the number one verse, love me, he says to love me and keep my commandments. And okay, well, if I'm not forced, what kind of love forces you to either love me or else I'm going to torture you forever? It didn't quite add up to me. It started to add up less and less as I started getting exposed to some of these other things. Of course, I never really held back on my thoughts or perspectives as they developed. So my parents had to learn ultimately, like, the great thing about them is they do have unconditional love for me, and so it was, a lot of, like, they didn't want to see me move to California where all the crazy people are. Probably, I'm from Virginia originally. And what did you say? All the fruits and nuts. Yeah. So that was definitely what was sort of ingrained, and so, they did not love it, but they learned very quickly, there's no sense in trying to control me either. I was beyond, I was out of the house at that point. There was nothing that could be done. I'm not really one who's that easily controlled or influenced. I've always kind of went my own way. And so they just had to sort of cope and deal with it. And, and then I had a child a few years later, unplanned. And that was challenging for them too. And of course, challenging for me. And now it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. But at the time, that was another, during those years, I definitely was throwing a lot of wrenches, into their vision of what I would probably end up like.
Right. And that's the bottom line is what our family's vision for what we're supposed to be isn't necessarily the same thing as what our vision for ourselves ends up being. And I think it takes courage to be able to forge your own path and to decide, yeah, that's really not for me, but I'm going to do this instead. Mm-hmm. And even when people think you're nuts and they say, well, that you won't be able to make that work, and all and all and all, that motivated me. I was like, okay, watch me. And so it worked for me. I think other people probably aren't as motivated by somebody telling you that you can't do it, but I certainly was. And the entrepreneur. Now not so much at this age, because I've just done so much and have seen so many miracles unfold in my own life of things that after it happened, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe I really made that happen. Because, I have all these, one example, I have all these patents and trademarks and stuff, and I'm not an engineer. I have a degree in communications.
Right.
I don't know what a Delta P is, but I know how to hire good engineers that do. And so,
exactly.
If somebody would have told me when I was growing up or in college that I'd be an inventor of surgical devices, I would say, yeah, okay, go have another glass of wine or something.
Exactly.
There's no way. But I think, to your point, we can do whatever we want. So, well, we do this show, everybody, every Thursday night. We record it every Thursday night at 8 Eastern, 7 Central, and 5 Pacific. And the call-in number is 712-770-4160. Access code 533677#. You can find this information a bunch of different places on my website, AskJulieRyan.com. You can also follow me on social media at Ask Julie Ryan on Instagram, Ask Julie Ryan on Facebook, Ask Julie Ryan on YouTube, and Ask Julie Ryan on Alexa. If you want to hear the show and you have Alexa, you can just say, Alexa, play Ask Julie Ryan podcast, and Alexa will play it for you. Also, on my site, you'll be able to sign up for my blog, and that's a weekly question that somebody has submitted, and I answer it, and I send it out, and it's usually really fun, whatever the question is, and usually interesting. And then I also put in there a reminder to call into the show. And then while you're on my website, too, sign up for a private appointment. They last an hour, and then I get you all to myself, which is a blast, and we can talk about whatever you want. I can scan you medically. I can scan your pets. We can talk about past life stuff. We can talk to deceased loved ones. We can do spirit guide stuff. I can tell how close to death somebody is, whatever. And it makes it really fun. And we can spend the hour however you want with any or all, a combination of all of my buffet of psychicness, as I say. One other thing I wanted to mention, I am getting ready to start my third angelic attendant training. It starts, the first class is July 13th. I have a couple of spots left, so go on my site and check that out. And what that is teaching people how to do the things that I do, the woo-woo things that I do, and also how to raise their vibrational level to the level of spirit, and then they can take it in any direction that they want. And one of the people that took my first class in the beginning of the year said, and this is a quote, she said, "Taking the angelic attendant training with Julie was the best gift I've given myself on my spiritual journey. Her guidance, knowledge, and gentle spirit were everything I needed to unlock the next level in connecting with my spirit guides and a deeper understanding of the energy that we are all so divinely connected to. It's life-changing knowing that we all have the ability to connect to each other energetically and help each other heal and overcome." And that's from Angie Irway in Cooperstown, New York. So that'll give you an idea. The one thing that I hear consistently from all of the graduates of the angelic attendant training is that they are now able to do things that were unfathomable to them beforehand, like what we were just talking about, Brandon, that, that I'm an inventor of surgical devices. Where'd that come from? I mean, that was unfathomable to me before. People are able to connect with spirit, alive and deceased. They're able to do healings. They're able to find a sense of purpose in their life. Some of them are finding what they call their soulmates. Some of them are saying to me, every one of them has said to me that they are living a life of joy now that they didn't even think was possible. They said it's just unimaginable. Their lives are unfolding in magical ways, every one of them. So I encourage you, if you're interested in that, go to my website, AskJulieRyan.com, and check out the Angelic Attendant Training. So, all right, Brendan, back to you.
Yes.
So my next question deals with, I know that you've been very successful in the vacation industry, and was there a time when you knew that this was not where you were going to be fulfilled? And did you have an aha moment or an epiphany where you said, okay, I need to branch out into something in a different area and it needs to be spiritual? And if you did, what was the catalyst to get you to move in that direction?
I had, so Resort Share, as we referenced, started 2010, and around 2014, 15, right around there, I had some new business partners, or a new business partner came in that really opened the door for me to potentially stop working day to day at the company I'd created, right? I'd founded. And so I took that opportunity. I had been, I think my friends and family, and everyone around me, ears were just bleeding from me always wanting to talk about this spiritual stuff. And so I felt like it was the right thing to do, to look at finding an outlet and finding a way to, I hadn't really ever thought that much about podcasting. And just, I think one night it kind of came to me like, oh, that would be, my friend was staying with me at the time, who's an audio engineer and, has a lot of experience with that. Actually, an old bandmate, and really good with the audio aspect. I was like, look, why don't we start a podcast? You could be my co-host, and, you can edit and put them out. And so we started that way. And he was with me for the first maybe year, a little less, until, then switched to being me. So it was, there was an opportunity that opened up for me to not, where the company didn't need my day-to-day energy to continue forward. And then that sort of we hit it was a pretty wild ride for me, though. It was, that person came in as someone who was going to help us get to an exit. He had a huge company before. He had taken a company from $1 million a year in sales to just under $1 billion a year in sales.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he is a bigwig guy. He had represented Mitt Romney to the Catholic community in the 2012 election, kind of the man energy, if you will. And he had a lot more experience than me and my partners, which were more like, scrappy entrepreneur kind of guys who had grown something from us to, 100 or so employees. And so he's going to help us get to an exit. And then what was interesting about it, he did indeed bring in someone who was looking at buying us. And then this is like 2015. And within 12 hours of getting an offer to be bought out for $30 million, we learned that the biggest timeshare development company in the world did not like us playing in their sandbox. We did rental for their owners, right? And we were doing a lot of rental through like Booking.com and Priceline. And so they got together and partnered with Booking and Priceline and said, basically, we want you to stop doing business with these guys. Mm-hmm. And so basically the two big behemoths got together, the two multi-billion-dollar companies got together, pushed the little guy out. And so within 12 hours of getting this offer to be brought, my exit, everything I wanted to get to with it, it was taken away. Mm-hmm. So, here's your offer to be bought out. Oh, never mind. There goes 90% of your revenue. We're not going to still buy you.
And when that happens, there's one 4-letter word that I want you and everybody to remember when you have a situation like that. And that 4-letter word is next.
Yeah.
Well,
next. That's great. I love that. I love the 4-letter word. I was waiting to see what that was going to be.
I know. And everybody does.
And it got a little weirder because then we found out, because it was originally me and my brother. I sparked it off. Then my brother came in very early, and that's when it really became an official thing. And then maybe a year after that, a good friend came in as the third partner, and we gave him his equity into the company. And then towards the end was the bigwig guy that I talked about, the fourth partner to get us to the exit. Well, once the fourth partner came in, the third and fourth became like two peas in a pod. I left to go start the podcast. So now my brother's left with him. A whole energy dynamic changed. Very not, I definitely see them as the villains in my story now. And I don't say that necessarily in a bad way. I think they played the roles they were meant to play, but they definitely a lot of ego, a lot of arrogance. The reason we lost the deal was because of some arrogant things that one of them did without consulting the rest of us. And so, what happened is we lost the deal. And then within a week or so, we found out that two of them were conspiring on how to trick us out, me and my brother, out of the equity that was left. Just by, we happened to, they had connected their email with my brother's years earlier, and he got onto webmail instead of his regular mail and saw all these emails that were connected, and we uncovered that they were trying to steal what was left. Now, we had given both of them their equity in the company to begin with. And so at that time, me and my brother did just that next. We said, look, we could fight. These guys are doing some really shady stuff. But at that point in time, we just wanted our energy away from them. Obviously, we had just hit a brick wall with, some of the issues the company was facing, losing 90% of its revenue. And we said, you know what? You don't have to take what's left. We've uncovered what you're trying to do. You can have it. We just want a release to get away from you. And we walked away. And that was one of the hardest decisions of my life. I mean, here's something a few months earlier I'd been offered $30 million for, and we walked away. And we started a new travel company out of the ashes of that. And that is now thriving.
There you go. There you go.
So, and now I'm at a I'm sorry. I was just going to add one little thing. Now I'm at a point where I'm basically, stepping back a little bit from that company, even though it's thriving and growing, to focus more on this sort of work because it is so close to my heart and mind.
Right. Well, as we're getting near the end, I got two last questions for you. And the first one is, what do you mean when you say you help people elevate their consciousness? Can anyone learn to do that? Do people need to be at a specific level of consciousness before they resonate with your message? What do you mean by that?
Okay. So, as quantum physics will support, everything is vibration, right? You and I were made, what we call matter is actually 99.99999% space. The particles we look at as solid are actually vibrations of energy popping in and out of existence. We don't know where they come from or where they go to. They're intelligent when they show up here. And it's flickering so fast, like a movie projector, right? It appears solid. But really, it's a vibration. Everything is vibration. So when I talk about elevating consciousness, or more often I use even the word elevating your vibration, when you understand it's like, it's all varying degrees of the same thing too. Love, hate, hot, cold, but if our aim is indeed to have the most fulfilling life possible with the least amount of pain and suffering, then the game becomes, how do I elevate my vibration? So it's vibrating at a faster frequency, which is more congruent with love, the vibration of love and happiness and peace, and all of those things that we love and enjoy, and the best parts of life. Right now, that being said, the sweet's never quite as sweet without the sour. You've never seen a painting that didn't have shadow in it. Right, a beautiful work of art that didn't have shadow. The art behind you right now, I'm seeing there's shadow all in that. It's beautiful, and so I think we have to be careful not to hate on the negative, right? Because it's an important piece of the whole puzzle. But ultimately, we're at a point in our evolution where I think a lot of us have done the work. You could attest to this probably more than anyone about, how many of us have been through many difficult past lives to sort of pay the bill for the more rewarding lives that are, filled with laughter and, abundance and love and peace and a lot of harmony. And so that becomes to manifest that. We all create our reality. We are the creator and created rolled into one, I believe. So, what's the most important game in town? Well, elevating your vibration, making sure you're monitoring what you are emitting as a creator. If you want to know what you'll see tomorrow in your holographic projected reality, look at what you're emanating today. What are you being? It will tell you what you're being today will tell you what you're going to see tomorrow, because there is a lag in this 3D reality to some degree. So that is sort of what it's all about. And it's why I do the show 5 days a week. Because it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration, as I like to say. And so this is a place to do that. And there's many ways that one can do that.
Right.
It's just one avenue and one place that, for certain people who I think are close on the family tree with whatever vibration I represent in the world, it really resonates. And so they're attracted to tuning into that, me instead of Fox News or whatever, and so there's, when you can start understanding, even with TV, it's like television. It's that's actually the name of my new production company, Television Studios. And it's you literally, everything is vibrational in nature, and so it becomes very important once you understand that as to what you're consuming. It's why I don't watch a lot of dark things and things that I don't want to see more of. Where attention goes, energy flows, and so that's really what it's all about.
And I think the body, too, follows from a medical standpoint or from a physical and health standpoint. Certainly, the body is going to follow what the brain is seeing. And even when the brain doesn't believe it, even when the brain knows that it's something that's make-believe or it's fantasy or it's whatever. Certainly we've all been in scary movies or watched scary TV shows where we know it's pretend, we know it's fantasy, but our heart feels like it's going to jump out of our chest and our blood pressure's up and we're scared out of our minds. And that has an effect on the body. I think it was Tiger Woods who said, "See the ball, be the ball," before he took a shot, and he would look out into where he was trying to aim, whether it be a green or a fairway or whatever, and he would envision how that ball was going to go, and then that would automatically translate in his body to what the swing was that he took that would produce that kind of trajectory for the ball to land where he wanted it to land. And I've always
my grandfather did same thing.
Yeah.
My grandfather was a state skeet shooting champion, and he wasn't into anything woo woo. But he said he would envision the clay pigeon.
Mm-hmm.
What would happen before he would actually
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
And so
I think athletes do that a lot. So, as we're winding down, first of all, how do people find you? Tell us about your show. Tell everybody
Sure.
what they can do to find you, and how and where can they find you?
Sure. Well, I'm on all social media, not all social media. Actively, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. You can search Brandon Beachum, and my name is spelled like the beach and Or I like to think our names are sometimes encoded with who we are or what we're meant to be, and I break my name down. It's like B-A-Chum. So I feel like I'm meant to be a friend to the world.
I love that.
So, yeah, and like Bernie Madoff, he made off with everyone's money. You see these sometimes.
Oh my gosh!
Anthony Weiner, he gets kicked out of politics for sending inappropriate pictures. It's just kind of funny sometimes when you see these things. But Spirit.
What's Ryan stand for?
Well, it's my brother's name. Did I tell you that?
You did tell me.
It means little king.
Well, okay. What's a female version? Little Queen?
Little Queen, yeah. Yep. Brandon means beacon on a hill.
Okay.
So I'm okay with that one. So there you can find me via my name. As far as the podcast, it's the Positive Head Podcast. You can find it anywhere there's podcasts, iTunes or any apps that you have, or Spotify or SoundCloud or YouTube even. And then also, of course, if you want to go back to the archives of my show, what I do, there's a really fun game, Julie, that I've actually put on positivehead.com, and I call it the game with the universe, YO universe. And so I have people go and choose the first number, 1 to, at this point, around 950. First number that pops in your head without thinking of it. Don't choose your favorite number. What's the first one that comes to your head? And then I have them type it in a box, and I say, this is your higher self knows every episode I've ever done, what I said, what you most need to hear at this point in your journey that will, help you along. And so it's a game, you can go play the game with the universe on positivehead.com. And then the most recent is Optimystic.tv. And that's spelled like mystical, MYSTIC. And that's where, excuse me, that's where you can find all the information about the new, late night style talk show that I begin filming next week.
Right. How exciting. How exciting. Okay. So in a sentence or two, tell us what you hope to accomplish with your efforts to help people explore their own spirituality. That's
a good question.
What's your elevator speech answer to that question?
Yeah. I what I say to that is it's really I have selfish reasons, and I call it the good kind of selfish. Once you understand and you begin to understand that everywhere you go, you're there waiting for yourself. You're the only one in the room. And that is truly when you're coming into mastery, when you understand everyone that bumps up against you is an extension of you in some way, shape, or form that you have the opportunity to grow from and to help grow with. And so my aim is to help elevate the consciousness and elevate the vibration of others. Why? Because there are no others. And everything that I put out comes back to me. That the true, as entrepreneurs, we know about ROI, right? Return on investment. Well, the true ROI that matters is ripple of impact. And that's truly what I'm seeking to do, is have the biggest ripple of impact I can, so that I can help as many other me's as possible to have the greatest and grandest experience in their life that is possible for themselves.
Very well said, my friend. Very well said. All right, everybody. So, Positive Head Podcast, Brandon Beachum, like the beach and an the beach I like that. I like that, Brandon. And everybody, we'll be back next week. I'll be back next week. We'll be taping a live show and be taking callers from anybody that wants to call in and wants me to help them answer life's unanswerable questions that are going on in their world. So that'll be fun. Check out my angelic attendant training, Follow me on Instagram, Ask Julie Ryan, Facebook, Ask Julie Ryan. Tell your family and friends about the podcast, about Ask Julie Ryan's podcast, and also about Brandon's Positive Head podcast. And until next week, everybody, happy 4th of July. Have a great week. Talk to you next week. Bye now.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to follow Julie on Twitter at Ask Julie Ryan and like her on Facebook at Ask Julie Ryan. For information on how you can ask Julie your question, please visit AskJulieRyan.com.